This is the Kaleidoscope Creepypasta, original by Unknown, retold by yours truly. While holidaying in Maine, my wife and I stopped in the picturesque town of Boothbay, where we were staying at a local inn for the weekend. The morning after we arrived was particularly dreary and rainy. On the way back to the inn, after visiting the local market, the heavens opened, drenching us in a matter of seconds. Since our planned picnic was out of the question, we sought shelter in a dilapidated little antique store near the harbour. While my wife inspected the large chest and side tables near the door, her attention mainly drawn to a lovely example of Victorian lady's travelling case that I made a note to purchase on the way out of town, as our anniversary was coming up, and God help me if I forgot it again this year. I examined eagerly the antique tools and seafaring equipment inside the glass sales counter at the back. Being a collector of optics and of mariners' instruments, I had hoped to find a sextant or perhaps an old leather-bound telescope. It was very rare, but sometimes you found old equipment from the age of discovery in these shops. Unfortunately, nothing really stood out. While most of the equipment was slightly tarnished and dusty, it was not very old or unique. I was just about to leave when a particularly interesting piece caught my eye. It appeared to be a heavy brass torch bearing a worn brown patina, but remarkably modern in design. It reminded me a lot of the steampunk items you see occasionally on Amazon nowadays. I asked the shopkeeper, but all he could tell me was he found it in an attic of an old sailor, locked away in a safe under the floorboards. It was found under a chest containing several of the other compasses and sextants on display. He inquired as to whether I would like to purchase it for $5, or perhaps have it for free.
"It's worthless to me. Nobody wants it,"
the old man chimed, his raspy voice containing a hint of what I later understood to be desperation. When I remarked about the price, he sighed wearily, and then reached into the cabinet and retrieved it for me.
"Here, see for yourself, mister,"
he replied. The craftsmanship was wonderful, quite durable, and apparently handmade, perhaps somewhere in Europe. Worn lettering indicated it might be German, or perhaps Austrian in origin, yet I detected a faint Latin script adorning the lens, faint enough not to impair the light, but clearly visible. I twisted the bulb housing, and a weak red beam swept out. Poking it into a dark corner of the shop, I was greeted with fantastic swirls of red, black, and orange, a living fire, moving and then entwining with each other like a pit of eels. Occasionally I swore I could make out screaming faces in the light. As I stared further into this unusual projector kaleidoscope, my fanciful mind invented ghoulish figures and sinuous gnarled tendrils. Shutting the device off, I turned excitedly to the shopkeeper. "Fantastic," I said. "It must have an oil filter of sorts in front of the lens. I have 2 Victorian kaleidoscopes at home, but none are illuminated like this."
"You don't get it, do you? No one gets it. They all come back to return it after a while,"
the old man said, visibly shaken. "Nonsense," I proclaimed. "It's a wonderful device. I simply must have it." Negotiating a bit more, and also buying the travel case for my wife, I realized the storm had abated. Quite pleased with my purchases, we returned to the inn and continued on our planned holiday. After I returned home, I placed the device in my office next to the others I had collected of its ilk. Later that day, when my wife had left to visit her friends, I played around a bit with the device, trying to figure out how it worked, but the more I used it, the more I was drawn away from the device itself and towards the images it created. The swirling faces and flames illuminated by the torch drew me in until I jumped back with a start as the front door slammed when my wife returned home. The next day, for some reason, I continued to play with the device. Something about it drew me in. After a while, I swore that I began to hear faint sounds coming from the corner where I pointed the light. A bit shaken, I turned off the light and left the room. Immediately the sounds stopped. I then berated myself for being so foolish. Sounds from a torch? How silly. Over the next few days, I started to translate the engravings around the item. While the German was quite easy, as I happened to speak the language, the engravings did not contain anything of note, just a prayer against evil spirits and a few warnings not to use the torch. The Latin was a bit more interesting. It was some variation of "I show the truth," combined with a few other invocations that I could not make out. I swiftly made an appointment with a friend of mine who specialized in old texts for the following morning, before leaving my office for the day, shaking my head to clear my vision. I did not know why, but over the past few weeks I started to see things move out of the corner of my eye, but when I focused on them, nothing was there. It was later that very night when it happened. In my dreams I started to hear the whispering again, the faint sounds I had heard once before in the corner of my office. Slowly the sounds got louder until I could make out the words,
"You can see us. You can see us."
over and over again. Suddenly I was awoken by a gut-wrenching scream. A scream that came from me. I looked down and saw a shadowy tendril remove itself from my stomach. My blood slowly pooling on the bed next to my wife, who was already dead, torn apart by the creatures. As my thoughts slowly faded to black, the inscriptions and the warnings made sense. It was not a protection. The damn thing just showed us what was really there, and they did not like being seen. The last thing I saw was my body rise up, take hold of the torch, and start making its way back to Maine. That was the rewritten Kaleidoscope Creepypasta, written and narrated by Fringlish.